goes into effect that has one military style characteristic. Just as they did in '93, you will be required to register that gun, and you can keep that gun for as long as you want.
What about transferring it?
What about transferring?
I'm sorry?
When you die, and it goes down to your children.
Yes, you can do that. You can do that.
Can you give it to somebody? Can you transfer a certificate?
Yes, you can.
So the certificate is transferable.
Or out of state, or to a deal.
My last point with respect to magazines, effective upon passage, when the governor signs the bill, magazines in excess of 10 will no longer be for sale in the state of Connecticut. If someone has a magazine greater than 10 for a handgun, a Glock 19, for example, or if you have a magazine rated for 10 for a long gun, and you have that long gun in your house, you can have your Glock 19 with 19 bullets in the magazine, one in the chamber, in your house for your defense, just as you do now. If you transfer that gun out of your house, and you have a pistol permit, or you're putting the gun in the trunk of your car to go to a gun range or wherever you shoot for competition, you can't have more than 10 bullets in the magazine. If you get to the gun range and you want to go shoot on the weekends as you normally do, you can fill your magazine and shoot at the gun range. The only prohibition is that if you have a permit to carry a handgun and you're carrying a Glock 19, for example, that has a magazine with a capacity of more than 10, you can't have more than 10.
And how are you going to enforce that for the criminals? Obviously, the legal.
You're not going to force it for anybody. Just as a lot of our laws are enforceable, but you know, as everyone in this room knows, that the overwhelming majority of us follow the laws, and we will follow the laws. The alternative, and I respect the fact that you don't like the magazine ban at all, but the alternative was to force everyone who had a Glock 19, and the overwhelming majority of handguns have a magazine with a capacity more than 10. The alternative was to force everybody to get rid of their magazines and buy a new one. I didn't think that was fair. The other alternative was a lot of people said, I use this as my main defense in my home. Well, you can continue to use it as your main defense in your home, unchanged under this law. So what will happen is, and I apologize because I've forgotten the staging of dates, but it is 6 months, a year out. There will be created, on the state website, you will go on, if you have a pistol permit, you put your name, your address. They will ask you, do you are in possession of magazines more than 10? Let's say you have 5 of them. You put your name, your address, you might have to put your pistol permit number, and you say yes, 5. When you go to renew your pistol permit, you'll fill out that application, there'll be a questionnaire. Do you have magazines with a capacity greater than 10? If the answer is yes, and it's 5, you'll say 5.
What is the purpose of that?
The purpose of...
Why register the magazines? It just,
well, here's the theory behind it.
I got 2 million of them, so big deal.
Well, we don't... Right, so if you're going to prohibit the sale going forward of something, and you don't know how many there are, okay? The two ideas at the table with respect to a magazine ban were just grandfather everything and say, from now on, going forward, you can't sell it. But if you got caught by somebody doing something wrong, and you've got your gun on you, and you've got a magazine that's more than 10, how are you going to prove to the government that you had that prior to the law passing?
But that's irrelevant. You committed a crime with your gun. The fact that you had...
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Because you could, if you want a scenario, they happen all the time. You could be, the police could be called to your house on a disturbance. The police can come into your house, and under well-established law called the plain sight rule, if they saw your gun sitting on a table, there's no kids in the house, there's nothing wrong with you putting your gun on the table, they could see that gun, all right? And if they see a magazine greater than 10, they could say, when did you buy this? If you can't prove that, you're not in a good position. So the registration certificate is a defense for you. It's also a way for us to know how many are there out there in the world. The other thing that we've heard is happening is a lot of people, if you go to a gun store, I've talked to a lot of people who own gun shops, there are obviously very long backlogs for certain guns. There's also a backlog for ammunition. There are people are coming in saying, can I trade in my 30-round mag for a 10-round or a couple of 10-round mags? And this will allow that to happen. So we don't the sale prohibition is exempted for you to take it to a federally licensed gun dealer who can take it in return and then sell it out of state. Their incentive to do so. So those are the different provisions of the bill.
The question is, Senator, say you personally knew 6 months ago that this psychopath in Newtown was a likely time bomb, which many people did, apparently. Lived with an alcoholic mother who took him to the gun range regularly. What could you have done to prevent this atrocious act?
You're saying as a legislature?
Yeah, I mean, what could you have done legally to prevent this?
Under existing law or under this bill?
Existing or proposed?
Person.
I mean, I think under this bill, one of the things that's not in the bill, but it's in a task force portion of the bill, which concerns me again on the mental health side. I keep going back to the mental health side.
Right.
Because in order for you to discuss gun control, we had to address mental health. It was mandatory reporting. That is not in the bill yet. Where if a doctor or psychiatrist says this person is a danger to themselves or to others, do you report that person to the police? They're trying to figure out whether that's even legal or how that can be done. That's an issue.
So there would be nothing that you could have done. I'm not being
under our current law, because he was 20 years old, she was not required to safely store her guns. Now, this law would require that, and that doesn't mean that she would have. But this law would have required to, and I bet you everybody in this room who owns a gun knows what the law requires them to do to safely store it. I bet you all do.
Beyond that, Eric Harris, out at Columbine, had threatened to do something like this periodically, and nothing was done about it. There were tentative phone calls from the police to the house, nothing was done. Is anything being proposed that would stop this, that would come in and take this kid out of the house and put him somewhere, or no?
Well, that was the mental health part we were talking about, committed, not committed, probate court getting involved during the process, or if they actually need to commit somebody, they're on the radar screen.
New York passed, and I don't know the exact language is, they passed some kind of a $500, almost like a finder's fee if you turned in someone. They have mandated reporting if you saw something like this. Those are things that we didn't think were going to fit in this legislation.
But I mean,
I mean,
they're on the under this law. First, there will now be a radar screen, and secondly, they will be placed on the radar screen. Hopefully, you're going to get everybody? Absolutely not. Are you going to legislate evil? Absolutely not. Are you going to solve this problem 100% going forward? Absolutely not. Does that mean we don't try?
No, but how are you going to get them, is what I mean.
Yeah.
Them to counseling or something? Or
Commit them? Counseling?
You can commit them. Will this be allowed?
Potentially. That's the way this process is supposed to play out. If someone is going to be a danger to themselves or to society, they should. And I think that process already exists right now. But if someone has to come in and drag and say, here, Shaban is a danger to himself, and present me to the probate court. If people get on the radar screen, there's going to be a process that's being developed, modeled after, I think, Massachusetts, that will keep them on the radar screen and hopefully, start tracking something. So grab some of those people.
How would you get them off the street?
Yeah,
that's
Get
what
them out of the circulation, a person that has a
if someone gets committed, they're off the
In
street.
1963, under the Kennedy Act, they changed this whole law. They shut the institutions down. There's only one institution in the state now for people, and they let them out. They don't keep them in there. They let them out. They say, take your pills. They take it for a week. They're out of pills and they forget.
well, one of the things we've learned, and we've heard this before, and obviously the spotlight is brighter, is that there are virtually no services for a very vulnerable age of 18 to about 24. And those are things we absolutely have to do.
Try to say it, but I mean,
She had her hand up too, so that's right. Ladies first, perhaps?
there you go.
I'm a former counselor that treats children in elementary schools in Houston, Texas. Moving up here has opened my eyes so widely. I'm a resident of Easton. We pulled 2 of our children out of the school system. There was no counseling, there was no, let's say, my children wore square pegs and not fitting in the round holes. My gifted son was pretty much left to nothing. We pulled him out, put him in Easton Country Day where he thrived, and he's a high school student in the high gifted at Notre Dame High School. We have a lot of problems in the education system, and that's where really we need to go. Because if we effectively work with our children at a young age, have more community effort activities. There's a tribes program out there. I think I've sent it to both you gentlemen. We used it in Texas. It's not the be-all, end-all. We're still never going to get 100%, but we have to grow our children. We have to let them be. ADHD, AD. We just have to let the kids run and play and be. And we really need to work on education, because then we won't have to put people necessarily in places. We won't have children getting to the age of 20 and shooting out everyone. I'm sorry. But I really hope that education is looked at a lot more, especially in our elementary and middle and high schools.
It's not the guns.
Thank you.
Do you like the concept that we're talking about having mental health first aid training in the younger grades?
I watched the CPTV information about first aid training. I know little about the specific first aid, that program, but that looks as a after effect. I'm looking at the tribes program, and I can send it to both.
Yeah, you're looking more of a
I did it.
holistic approach early on as opposed to not Band-Aids, not all the
Everybody, inclusion, you know, gifted, autistic, everybody, and they're brought into the classroom for part of the time, but Johnny plays with Billy and everybody else. I call it Kumbaya, but I know I've used it in Texas, in Spring Ridge Independent School District, and it worked. So, is that North Carolina? I would highly recommend you to look into that also.
Gentlemen, fellow in the back.
Sure.
He beat you by like 30 seconds.
A couple of questions. Just the first one's a clarification.